final frontier. These are the podcasts of the podcast Enterprise. Its only mission to explore story structures, to analyze our favorite characters and plot lines, to boldly talk about what everyone has seen before. Hello and welcome everyone to the first episode of the podcast Enterprise. As you heard in the intro, this is everything about Star Trek, Starship Enterprise. I have with me my co-host Parvathi.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our podcast.
Since this is the first episode, we'll introduce ourselves. My name is Bala Ramadurai. I am an author, professor, and I love podcasting.
I'm Parvathi Ramkumar, and I'm a writer, author, translator, and I'm a blogger. And I absolutely love Star Trek, the original series. And I really, really look forward to talking about this.
What will you find in these episodes? In these episodes, Parvati and I will give you a quick summary, talk about some of the story points, story arcs, things that we like, don't like even, and talk about the characters.
We can talk about the plot and what we think about the characters. Some of these adventures that take place in each episode, we can talk about those too. I think this is a great idea.
One episode, we will take it and dissect it and talk about it in detail. So if you're in a hurry, the first few minutes will tell you what the plot line is and what we think about it, and then we'll expand on it later on. Now, if you have more time and you want to listen to the whole podcast, it's available.
Which would be awesome, actually.
Just to get things like an origin story of a superhero movie, we're going to say, how did we get into Star Trek, the original series, and what's our story behind that? I was a kid, and this was the black and white days when TV transmission was in black and white. We had TVs which only showed black and white program, and Star Trek was rerun, I don't know, way back when, and I saw the series. I was totally in awe of this pointy-eared gentleman speaking in a strange way, and then there's this captain who's doing things together. It was all so, and it was action-packed. For me, I couldn't take my eyes off the screen the entire time. And then one of our relatives invited us over and said, why don't we have lunch? And it's around the same time as Star Trek. We can also watch that. I did take the chance, went there. It happened that these people had color TV at home. Absolutely amazing. We saw the episode The Arena for the first time ever in color. I saw, red shirt and beige and blue. And it meant something in the episode. It was amazing. That was a first memory of Star Trek that I have. And after that, I think I watched Star Trek, the original series, I don't know, so many times that I think you just show me a bit of a scene and I would know which episode it is from. So that's the level of a number of times I must have seen that. What's your stories, Parvati? What is your first memory of Star Trek and how did you get into it?
So my first, memory of Star Trek is a little bit scattered because I started somewhere in the middle of the Next Generation when I was a kid, and then I saw this, the Next Generation Starship Enterprise, and I thought this is pretty cool. I like this, and it's like I watched episodes this way and that, and then I kind of lost touch with Star Trek for like more than a decade, a long time, and then recently I rediscovered the original series on Netflix, and I started remembering that I have seen some of these episodes as a kid on TV, but they were also scattered, and Netflix had all these episodes in sequence, and I saw them, and yeah, it's been on repeat ever since. I love the idea of going into deep space and exploring. And it's also particularly interesting to me because this is recorded in the 60s and you have different technology in the starship. So it's somewhere between being a completely manual enterprise and the computers are, under control. They're not out there controlling the entire thing. And it's pretty fascinating, actually. So yeah, I watch it almost every day.
The gadgets, I mean, we can have an entire episode around gadgets and
Yes.
and the technology and the perennial conflict between logic and illogic and so many things
yes,
that we can
very
talk about.
Vulcan-like. Yes,
It's amazing. What is fascinating about Star Trek as a series itself? Again, like you said, this was
yes,
shot in the 60s. I didn't
yes,
even know that it was in the 60s. I assumed it was in the 80s because that's when I saw it in the first time. But then it's a make believe, right? So they're all in sitting
yes,
there, and but you get so much into it. The novel concepts that they introduce, like the
yes.
elevator, and use even that as a way of knowing about them. The sick bay where they show you what's
Oh,
their
yes.
diagnosis methods, and the neat gadgets there as well. The tricorder and the little thing that Dr. McCoy holds in his hand.
Oh,
That's
yes.
a
The
neat
spinning
set.
thing. Yes.
Yeah, I really want to get hold of that. That'll be so awesome to have.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. They have some really shiny, fancy gadgets, and you see them and you think those would be really nice to have because they work so well and they look so good. And yeah, I think, yes, and I think Star Trek, the original series, captures the, mystery of deep space really, really well. It's very mysterious. It's frightening sometimes because, you
Hmm.
go into uncharted solar systems, you find planets that you know nothing about, you're escaping from the concept of linear time. It's got some really novel ideas in there.
Like viruses get in and create havoc in the entire crew. There are episodes where, because the fabric of space and time itself is warping, they have weird
Yes.
effects on the crew itself. So you can see how the external environment makes a big difference in for the crew, and how the crew is able to handle such things. A
Yes,
mixture of so many.
yes, there's a huge human element to it, and that makes it all the more interesting because you have them dealing with things obviously when you're out in deep space, you have a lot of things happening that you wouldn't expect at all. And I think they handled it really well. And of course, sometimes it turns out to be very scary, but still, yeah.
What's also fascinating is the fact that they have, on the one hand, very advanced species that
Yes,
they feel inferior to. All this heightened technology and development seems so small compared to what they've been able to achieve. And on the
yes,
other end of the spectrum, they meet civilizations which are hardly, they even give the scales, right?
yeah,
Level
they do, they
one,
do.
level two, they have all that. And there we become the ones with superior technology. Humans, I meant humans who
Yes,
go there, exploration, they do. And they have their regulations, where again they feel a conflict. There are people who are going through the same cycle that we are. We shouldn't interfere because that's sort of against the prime
yeah,
directive.
against the prime directive, yes.
That
And
is recurring
it's
theme again.
also very true. And it's also very interesting that humanity is often seen as a predator species in Star Trek by all the other alien races. So
Hmm.
they're always expecting us to wage war on them, which is which is also a very interesting concept, I think. And
Right.
I think, they also introduce some uh, rather unique ideas like an imitative culture or a stagnant culture, which, of course,
Hmm.
when it comes to the Organians, are not really stagnant. But anyway,
So, if you were to pick one favorite episode, and somehow I would force you on a phaser point, so to
okay.
speak, set
I
on
bet.
stun. Okay, set on stun.
Okay, set on
Let's
stun.
be
Okay.
nice to each other.
Okay.
What would you pick as your favorite episode?
Okay, so there are two episodes actually that I really, really enjoyed. And one
Okay.
is the Trouble with Tribbles because it's funny.
Oh yes.
And yeah,
Oh yes.
and I really like the idea of this guy abusing his power and diverting a starship to look after some wheat. And I found that funny. So there is, I also found Mirror Mirror very interesting because you have
Okay.
this
Yeah.
entire concept of a parallel universe where
Right.
everything is switched, but not quite. Okay, so I've got the phaser now. What's your favorite?
Oh my god. Balance of terror. They're not face to face exactly initially. They're a mysterious force
Yes.
that coming in and going in with some mysterious technology, and
Hmm.
then eventually there is a face off. It's fascinating for me. This is another theme that we will also talk about in our individual episodes, is
Mhm.
how there is a lot of commentary going on at a subtext level. I think was a commentary on the whole Soviet Union versus USA Cold War, which was just starting
Right.
back then, right? So for me, it was excellent, example of that. So I
Mm.
loved the back and forth and the battle of wits. On the one hand, the superior technology. On the other hand, there is experience and
Yes.
being patient when taking the right decision. All that sums up what Star Trek is all about.
Yeah, and the thing with that episode is you also have this idea of discipline and sticking to it
Correct.
despite the pressure. Yeah,
Yes.
and sometimes the starship commander may not want to do some things, but he's forced to because of external factors. I think
Hmm.
that that episode did that very well.
You're right. Yeah. In fact, to exactly paraphrase what you said, Kirk says, "Bones, what if I'm wrong?" Even he who comes across as being the most confident person on that starship has self doubts and has a vulnerable side.
Yes,
Fantastic. And it comes at a moment where everything is comes to a standstill. Both these are at loggerheads, and there's a standstill. Both of them have to play dead, and that's
yes,
when they introduce this whole
exactly.
idea of their exchange of what if I'm wrong. So it's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing, and the Romulan captain was very impressive in that episode. So
Yes, yes,
it
yeah.
is a perfect counterbalance to Kirk, I think.
The same actor shows up as Spock's dad later on.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, in Babel, I think. Right.
Yes, Journey to Babel. Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
Journey to Babel.
Yes.
Yes,
So this was a curtain raiser to our podcast series.
absolutely.
So we will take episode after episode and analyze it, just like
Yes,
our intro message said. We will look at starting from the cage all the way
right.
till the
Yes.
end. I don't know if we'll get into season three. Not my favorite. I know, Parvati, it's not your favorite either, but
No, it's
let's
not. Yeah,
so
seasons 1 and 2 are my favorites by far.
yeah. Yes, absolutely. I know that.
Yes.
But yeah, let's see if we can get all the way to Turnabout Intruder. But this is to the listeners. If you are interested in a certain aspect of what we talked about, we can certainly look at your comments and talk about it and also bring it up in the next recording or even have a special episode where we address some of the comments that you have. So feel free to share it on any social media or anything that you find. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Parvati. This is fun with the recording of the cage then.
Yes, absolutely.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening to the podcast Enterprise. Please do share your reviews with us and please share this podcast with any of your writing friends or trickies. Live long and prosper.